I only wanted coffee. That was all. I hadn't slept the night before. My brain was fogged with formulas from an econ midterm and the kind of half-baked anxiety that doesn't let you sleep, only hover between dreams and dread. The campus cafe was packed like always around noon, a sea of flannel, beanies, laptops, and noise. I was halfway to the counter when I saw her, and everything stopped. There she was, Elena, my girlfriend, the girl I had walked to class in the rain, the girl who once kissed me under the flickering streetlight outside my dorm and whispered, "I've never felt this safe with anyone." She was sitting in a booth by the window. That laugh, I would have known it anywhere. Except this time, it wasn't mine. It was his. And then, like some shitty indie film playing out in slow motion, she leaned forward, tucked her hair behind her ear, and kissed him. Not a quick peck. Not a drunken mistake. No, this was full-on lips parted, eyes closed, hands gently touching his face kind of kiss, the kind that meant something. The kind that you give to someone you're falling for. The kind she used to give me. My breath caught in my throat. I stood there frozen, clutching my backpack strap like it was the only thing tethering me to the ground. A guy behind me muttered a "watch it" as he squeezed past. I didn't move. Then she smiled. After the kiss, she smiled. And it wasn't guilt that washed over her face. It was comfort. Familiarity. As if this wasn't the first time. As if she belonged in that moment, with him. I don't know how long I stood there before my legs moved. My feet dragged me backward, away from the coffee line, away from her, away from the version of my life that had just been obliterated. I stumbled outside into the crisp autumn air. My lungs burned. The wind hit me like a slap. And I walked. Nowhere in particular. I just had to move. Each step felt like it echoed through a new emptiness inside me. You think in moments like that you'll feel fire, rage, something. But all I felt was this cold hollowness, like something had been scooped out of my chest and left wide open for everyone to see. There had been signs, I realized. The late replies. The forgotten plans. The way she pulled away from hugs just a second too soon. I had told myself she was stressed. Midterms, her internship, her dad's surgery. I made excuses for her because loving her had become a reflex. But now, that reflex was choking me. Back at the dorm, I paced in a daze. Her jacket was still draped over my desk chair, the one I'd lent her when she got cold walking back from the movie theater last week. Her perfume still clung to it, that vanilla amber scent that used to make my chest tighten in the best way. Now it turned my stomach. I sat on the edge of my bed, the springs creaking under the weight of what I had just seen. My phone buzzed. A message from her. "Hey babe, wanna hang tonight? I miss you." I stared at the screen for what felt like an hour. "Babe, I miss you." Did she write that right after kissing him? Did she even pause before texting me? Or was I just the backup plan, the comfort blanket she hadn't thrown away yet? I didn't respond. I couldn't. Instead, I pulled my hoodie over my head, grabbed my notebook, and disappeared into the one place I knew no one would follow me, the library basement. It was cold down there, always too quiet, but that night, I needed the silence. I needed somewhere I could fall apart without anyone seeing the seams. I didn't cry. Not at first. I flipped open my notebook and tried to focus on anything else, regression models, supply curves, price elasticity, but the numbers bled into her face. Her eyes. Her hand on someone else's chest. That's when the tears came. Silent, furious, pathetic. I gripped the pages like they could hold me together, but everything I had planned, the winter trip we talked about, the apartment we were going to tour next semester, the idea of us, it all collapsed. She had kissed someone else. And smiled. More than anything, that smile haunted me. Not the kiss itself. I could have told myself it was a mistake, a moment of confusion. But the smile meant something different. It meant she felt right in that moment. It meant she had already mourned what we had, and I was the only idiot left in the dark. I didn't sleep that night, or the next, and when Monday came, I skipped class and sat in the same basement corner with my laptop open, pretending to write an essay while my mind spiraled. I kept checking my phone, but not to message her, just to look at her name, to feel that ache in my chest like pressing a bruise just to know it still hurt. And it did. God, it did. By Thursday, I saw her again. In the hallway. She waved, as if nothing had happened. As if I hadn't watched her mouth move against someone else's in the cafe where we used to study together every Sunday night. I didn't wave back. I just kept walking. Because now I knew. The girl I loved was gone. Maybe she'd been gone for longer than I realized. Maybe I was too blind, too trusting, too desperate to believe in something beautiful. But I saw her smile after the kiss. And that smile didn't lie. I don't remember much about the days that followed, just that they seemed to blur into each other. Long stretches of silence broken only by the sound of my roommate's keyboard, the occasional knock on the door, or the low hum of music bleeding through the walls. My mind didn't function in hours anymore, only in flashbacks. Every time I blinked, I saw her. Everywhere I went, she haunted me. Elena's laugh echoed in the stairwell, even though it wasn't hers. Her scent seemed to linger in places she hadn't stepped into in weeks. I'd pass a girl wearing a cream sweater and do a double take, heart leaping into my throat, only to realize, again, that it wasn't her. That it would never be her again. Not the version of her I knew anyway. Sleep became optional. When it did come, it was either dreamless or worse, vivid. In one dream, I was in that cafe again, walking up behind her. But this time, when she kissed him, she saw me watching. And she smiled while still kissing him, eyes locked on mine. I woke up drenched in sweat. The dorm room felt like a coffin. Every corner reminded me of something. The gray hoodie she used to steal. The empty ramen bowls from nights we stayed in. The playlist she made that still sat unplayed in my Spotify. I couldn't stay, so I left. Most nights, I ended up in the library. Not because I was trying to catch up on schoolwork. That was a lost cause by now. I went because it was cold and quiet, and I could sit between tall shelves and not feel like I existed. There was a spot on the third floor, deep in the psychology section, where no one ever went. It smelled like old paper and floor cleaner. The kind of place you could disappear into. And I did. I brought textbooks I didn't open. A notebook I never wrote in. I just sat, staring at nothing, letting time pass. Letting her pass. But she didn't. She was everywhere. I saw her on the quad, walking hand in hand with him. It was 2 days after the cafe. They were walking like they had no shame, her fingers laced with his, like we had never existed. She wore that same beige coat I had bought her last winter, the one she swore made her feel soft like snowfall. Now it just made my blood boil. I didn't say anything. Didn't stop. I just turned and walked toward the science building like it had some gravity pulling me in. But the image stuck. Her hand in his. Her choice. That was the part that broke me the most. She had chosen this. She wasn't drunk. It wasn't some party mistake or some heated slip-up. She wasn't crying afterward or filled with regret. No, she had made a decision, day after day, to pull away from me and towards someone else. And the worst part? She never gave me a chance to fight for us. She'd just let it die. 2 weeks passed. Maybe 3. I stopped counting. Classes became background noise. I showed up, scribbled half-hearted notes, and left. My professors started giving me those "are you okay?" looks. I nodded, faked a smile once. That was enough to keep them at bay. But I wasn't okay. I was unraveling. One night, I found myself in the old reading room of the library. A huge cathedral of a space, wooden beams, towering windows, and silence that felt sacred. No one stayed there late except a few PhD candidates and a janitor who nodded at me like he knew I didn't belong, but didn't care. I stared at my laptop screen for hours. No tabs open, just the desktop. At one point, I pulled up a photo of Elena and me. We were at the fall festival, her face smudged with caramel from a candy apple, laughing as I tried to wipe it off with my sleeve. Her eyes sparkled in the photo. Mine too. We looked real, like something that could last. I stared at that picture until my vision blurred. Then I deleted it. Not just from the desktop. From everywhere. Photos. Messages. Voice notes. Gone. I thought it would feel freeing, but instead, it was like erasing proof that I had ever mattered to her. And maybe I never did. People started noticing. My roommate, Jake, asked one night, "Dude, you good?" I lied. Said I was just tired. Final stress. He didn't push, but the way he looked at me after, it was like he knew I was lying and didn't want to deal with the truth either. Can't blame him. Most nights, I didn't want to deal with it myself. My appetite vanished. I dropped 10 pounds without noticing. My hoodie started hanging off me like it didn't belong. People I barely talked to started asking if I was sick. Yeah, I was. Just not in the way they thought. One night, I wandered into the student center and saw a group of friends sitting around a table, laughing, eating fries. One of them had their arm around their partner, just casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And it hit me. That used to be me. That casual touch. That knowing smile. That feeling of being someone's person. Now, I was just a ghost. I sat on a bench outside that night and watched the lights flicker in the windows of the dorms. Somewhere, Elena was probably laughing. Maybe in his arms. Maybe in our old spot in the rec room. The thought made my stomach turn. But what scared me more than the betrayal was how numb I was becoming to it. Like pain was just background noise now. Static. Eventually, I stopped going to the cafe. Couldn't stomach the smell of cinnamon and espresso anymore. It reminded me of her. Of how I found out. Of how a cup of coffee turned into heartbreak. Instead, I stuck to vending machine granola bars and bottled water from the basement of the engineering building. I told myself I was surviving. But really, I was just existing. That's what grief does when it overstays its welcome. It turns into routine. Wake up. Avoid her. Avoid everyone. Walk. Sit. Sleep. Repeat. I didn't know who I was without her. And part of me didn't want to find out. Not yet. I didn't realize anyone was watching me. The library had become my shadow box. Cold, silent, and just dim enough that I could dissolve into its corners. Most nights, I picked the same table in the back, far away from the main study groups, but close enough to the floor-to-ceiling windows where I could stare blankly into the orange campus glow and pretend I was thinking. Truth was, I wasn't thinking anymore. I was just fading. I lived by a kind of ritual now. Hoodie up, headphones in, with no music playing, textbooks open, but never read, and pen in hand, never moving. That was my armor. Enough to keep people from talking to me. Enough to make me invisible. Or so I thought. They noticed me before I noticed them. At first, it was peripheral, a flicker of movement, soft laughter 2 tables down. I didn't care. I didn't lift my head. But they were always there. Not in a creepy way. Just, consistently. 2 girls. Always together. One had short dark hair, blunt bangs, oversized sweaters. The other, curly-haired, warm-toned. Always in leggings and crop tops no matter the weather. They whispered a lot. Took turns kicking each other under the table when one of them made a joke. It should have annoyed me. Their comfort, their joy, but it didn't. Because I recognized something in it. They had the kind of bond one missed. Easy. Intimate without effort. Sometimes they looked over at me. I felt it. That weight of someone's gaze. But when I glanced up, they'd go back to their notes or their whispered laughter. I chalked it up to curiosity. I wasn't exactly subtle. A guy who showed up night after night, looking like a ghost wrapped in a hoodie, surrounded by untouched books and half-empty Red Bulls. Still, they didn't avoid me like everyone else. They weren't scared off by my silence. They watched. Not constantly. Not like stalkers. But in those quiet stretches, between the midnight coughs and the creaking chairs, I could feel them wondering. I couldn't blame them. I didn't look like someone in pain anymore. I looked like someone undone. One night, near closing, I left my phone on the table when I went to refill my water. Stupid mistake. When I came back, it was exactly where I left it, but one of them had glanced at the screen. I knew because the curly-haired one looked up at me as I returned and said, softly, "That your girlfriend?" It was innocent enough. The lock screen was still a photo of Elena and me, a leftover from better days I hadn't had the energy to change. I didn't answer, just grabbed the phone, shoved it into my hoodie pocket, and sat down. The silence stretched. "Sorry," she said after a moment, not quite apologizing for looking, more like apologizing for asking. "It's just, you look like someone who's been through it." I didn't look up. Been through what? Heartbreak, the other girl said. The one with the bangs. Or something that feels like it. I didn't respond. What was I supposed to say? Yeah, you're right. I watched her kiss another guy while I was buying coffee, and now I don't know who the hell I am anymore. No. So I stayed quiet. But I didn't leave. Neither did they. Over the next few nights, the distance between our tables shrank. Not on purpose. Not at first. Just the usual dance of students rotating around outlets and study lamps. But it happened, slow and certain. One night they sat 2 tables away. The next one. Then, eventually, they claimed the seats across from me without asking. They didn't say much. Just spread their notes, plugged in their laptops, and occasionally whispered to each other while side-eyeing me like I was some animal slowly warming up to human contact. The curly-haired one introduced herself first. "I'm Talia," she said, chewing on the end of a pen. "She's Marin." Marin gave me a nod, fingers dancing over her keyboard. I said nothing, just stared at my notebook, pretending to write. but the corner of my mouth twitched. That was the first time I almost smiled in weeks. Talia was the talkative one, always humming under her breath, doodling vines in the margins of her notes. Marin was quieter but observant, eyes sharp behind round glasses. She had a habit of tilting her head when she listened, like she was trying to hear what you weren't saying out loud. They never asked me my name. They never asked me what I was studying, or why I never seemed to go home, or why I looked like someone who hadn't eaten a full meal since the start of the semester. They didn't push, but they noticed. Once, Talia reached into her bag and pulled out a granola bar, sliding it across the table without a word. I didn't eat it that night. I left it in my backpack. But the next day, I unwrapped it on the walk to class and tasted something for the first time in days. Salted peanut butter. It made my throat ache. The nights grew colder. Leaves turned brittle and gold. The library heater kicked on in loud, wheezing bursts that reminded me of my dad's old truck. And still, we three returned. Some nights they'd ask little questions. Soft things like breadcrumbs. You ever study at home? What do you think of this professor? Do you believe in déjà vu? I answered in nods, grunts, and occasionally full sentences. But mostly, I just listened. Listened to Talia talk about her brother who dropped out to travel through Chile. Listened to Marin talk about her fear of failure, of not being enough, of how she used to cheat on tests in middle school because the silence of not knowing the answer terrified her. And through it all, I realized they weren't just watching me. They were seeing me. The pain I carried, the exhaustion, the emptiness, and they weren't running. One night, past midnight, Talia looked up from her notes and asked, "Do you believe people can heal each other?" The question wasn't aimed at anyone in particular, but I felt it land. I looked at her for the first time, really looked. She had freckles under her eyes, hair like fire in dim light, a scar on her wrist, thin and silver. I opened my mouth. I didn't know what I was going to say, but Marin beat me to it. "I think we're all just waiting for someone to notice," she whispered. I looked down at my hands. For the first time in weeks, they weren't shaking. It was a Thursday night when it happened. Mid-October. Rain lashed the windows hard enough to make the glass shiver, and the library, normally a hive of stressed-out bodies and laptop clicks, had emptied early. Most students had already gone back to their dorms or the warm glow of campus lounges. But I was still there, and so were they. Talia sat cross-legged in her chair, her socked foot brushing against the edge of my side of the table. Marin was scribbling something in a thick notebook, a mechanical pencil gripped tightly between her fingers. And then it happened, so quietly I almost missed it. "You always hear this late. What are you running from?" Talia's voice was soft, not accusing, just curious. I didn't answer at first, just glanced up slowly, eyebrows furrowed. Her lips curved in that faint, knowing way, like she already expected me not to reply. Marin didn't look up, but I saw the corners of her mouth twitch. "I'm not running," I said eventually, voice rough. "Just avoiding." Talia nodded. "Fair enough." There was a beat of silence. Then she tilted her head toward me, like she was measuring something invisible in the air. "Heartbreak?" she asked, quieter this time. I blinked. My throat felt dry. You could say that. She didn't ask more. Didn't pry. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a plastic container. It was filled with grapes. She popped one into her mouth, then slid the rest toward me. I stared at it. She gave me a look. I took one, chewed slowly. It tasted sharper than I remembered grapes tasting. Cold, tart, almost electric against the numbness that had been living on my tongue for weeks. Marin finally glanced up. Her eyes met mine for a second, and for the first time, she smiled, really smiled. Not a polite smile, not a pity smile, just simple, real. It was enough to make my chest tighten. Over the next few days, the gap between us narrowed. No longer were they just girls sitting near me. They were, with me. Talia would toss her feet into the chair beside me and joke about how I never blinked when I stared at the window. Marin started borrowing my highlighters without asking, using the green one excessively just to annoy me. They brought snacks, shared playlists, mocked the overly dramatic architecture majors studying nearby. And slowly, I found myself leaning in. Not just physically, emotionally. Their laughter became a tether, something real to hold on to when the loneliness threatened to swallow me whole. One night, Talia asked me my name. "Liam," I said, voice lower than I meant it to be. She smiled like she already knew. They had a rhythm, the two of them. Talia was all light and chaos, sharp-tongued but warm-hearted. Marin was logic, order, silence, but with a dry wit that could slice you open if you weren't paying attention. And then there was me, the ghost boy dragging broken pieces of himself through the aisles of the library. Except I didn't feel quite so invisible anymore. One night, after the library lights flickered to signal closing time, none of us moved. Talia leaned back in her chair, stretching, her hoodie riding up just enough to reveal a sliver of smooth skin above her jeans. She caught me glancing, but didn't cover it, just smirked a little and said, "You really are bad at pretending you're not looking." I flushed, looked away. Marin snorted. "You're worse than her." "What?" Talia said, offended. "You flirt like a puppy on espresso," Marin muttered. "I do not." I watched them bicker with a half-smile I didn't realize had taken over my face. My heart felt strange, not broken, not whole, just awake, maybe for the first time in weeks. That weekend, I didn't see them. Saturday was quiet. I sat in the library alone and realized how much space they'd taken up in my mind. I missed their noise, their chaos. I missed them. Sunday night, they returned, hair damp from rain, cheeks flushed. "Had to bail on a friend's Halloween pre-party," Talia said, flopping into the chair across from me. "Too many frat guys wearing cowboy hats and calling themselves Yeezy. I'm traumatized." Marin rolled her eyes. She just didn't get enough attention. "Wrong," Talia grinned. "I got attention, just not the kind I wanted." Then she looked at me. Really looked. "What kind of attention do you want, Liam?" My throat tightened. I didn't know how to answer. Her eyes didn't waver. She didn't blink. Marin leaned forward slightly, her gaze more analytical, but no less intense. The silence stretched between the three of us. A charged moment. I felt something shift. After that night, things changed. They sat closer. Their teasing got bolder. The silences between us got heavier. Not awkward, not uncomfortable, but dense with possibility. They found ways to touch me. Lightly, casually. Talia would rest her foot against mine under the table. Marin would tug my hoodie drawstrings just to get a reaction. Once, when I leaned over to grab a book, Talia's fingers brushed my neck, soft and deliberate. It sent a jolt down my spine. And then there was that moment in the stairwell. It was late. We were leaving together. The air smelled like rain and dust. Talia leaned close and whispered, "If you keep looking at me like that, I might start thinking you want something." I froze. She smiled, then walked away. Marin followed but glanced back, her eyes unreadable. I stood there in the stairwell long after they were gone, pulse racing. The next night, the table was full of unspoken tension. They sat on either side of me this time. Their knees brushed mine. Their voices were low. Every laugh lingered a little too long. Every glance meant more than it said. Marin took one of my pens and started doodling on the back of my notebook, a sketch of a cracked heart being stitched together. Talia tapped her finger next to it and whispered, "You're not broken, you know. Just bent in a beautiful way." I didn't reply, but I didn't stop her hand when it slipped over mine and stayed there. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the cold. It started with a dare. Well, not exactly. It wasn't phrased like one. More like a joke that didn't quite sound like a joke. One of those comments you make when you want to say something real, but need the safety net of laughter to fall back on. We were in the library again. Surprise. The usual back table, half buried in open notebooks and half-eaten snacks. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everyone in pale hues, but I'd grown used to the low glow. It suited the quiet, the edges we lived in. Talia was playing with my pen again, spinning it between her fingers like she was bored of her own thoughts. Marin sat opposite her, legs tucked beneath her like a cat, scribbling something into a notebook that didn't look remotely academic. I was pretending to study, but mostly I was pretending not to stare at both of them. At the way Talia's cropped hoodie rode just high enough to flash a smooth line of skin when she stretched, and how Marin's lips curled whenever she found something amusing in her own writing, but never said it aloud. They were magnetic in different ways. Talia was the spark, unpredictable, bright, always reaching. Marin was gravity, subtle, pulling, patient. And I was the thing caught between them. Somewhere in the hum of pencil scratches and the soft rustle of pages, Talia suddenly said, "So." I looked up. She had that look again, the one she used when she was about to lob something sharp into the quiet. "If you had to choose," she began, her eyes flicking to mine, "which one of us would you kiss?" My breath hitched. Marin's pencil paused mid-word. Talia grinned. Come on. Don't make it weird. It's just a game. Is it? I asked, not trusting my voice to sound casual. Sure, she said, drawing her knees up on the chair and wrapping her arms around them. Purely hypothetical. Harmless. Marin was still watching me, still silent. And then she said, he doesn't have to choose. Talia arched an eyebrow. Oh, Marin didn't look at her, just stared at me. He could just say both. Talia laughed, low and throaty. That's not an answer. That's a cop-out. It's an honest answer, Marin said, cool as ever. I didn't say anything. My throat was suddenly dry, my heart an audible thud in my ears. Talia leaned forward. So, I looked at them. Really looked. Talia with her lips slightly parted, her eyes glinting like she already knew the answer but wanted me to say it anyway. Marin, still but focused, fingers idly tracing the spine of her notebook. Calm, sure, like whatever I said, she'd already weighed it and accepted it. And then, because something reckless had been building inside me for weeks, and because the question wasn't really a question at all, I said, only if it's both of you. There was a beat of silence. 1, 2. Then they smiled. Not laughed, smiled. Slow. Knowing. Shared. Marin was the first to move. She closed her notebook, slid it aside, and folded her arms on the table, resting her chin on them. Interesting answer, she murmured. Talia's gaze didn't waver. Ballsy. I swallowed hard, suddenly unsure if I'd just jumped off a cliff or opened a door I couldn't close. I was kidding, I said, though even I didn't believe it. Were you? Talia asked, leaning even closer. Marin's voice followed, a soft echo, because I wasn't. The air between us shifted, thickened. The library was still full of soft sounds, keyboards clacking in the distance, the occasional cough. But around our table, there was a hush that felt loaded. Talia's foot brushed mine under the table again, but this time she didn't pull it away. Marin's hand slid closer across the tabletop, fingers curling slightly, not quite reaching mine, but close. I've seen the way you look at us, Talia said. I opened my mouth, closed it. It's not a bad thing, Marin added quickly. We've just noticed, and we're not mad about it, Talia said, her grin returning, but slower this time. Not even a little. Something about the way she said it made my skin warm. You're grieving, Marin said gently. We know that, and we're not trying to replace anything. We just like you broken, Talia teased. Marin rolled her eyes. She means we like you honest. Real. Not hiding. And, Talia added, a little lonely. That landed. Because I was lonely. Still, even in their company, even as laughter returned to my mouth and colors crept back into my world, the ache hadn't left. I still dreamed about Elena. Still saw her in crowds. Still heard her voice in songs I used to love. But right now, sitting between these two girls who didn't flinch at my silence or judge my shadow, something else stirred. Not a replacement. An ignition. We don't have to do anything, Marin said, voice almost a whisper now. This doesn't have to go anywhere. But if it did, Talia said, tilting her head, would that really be so bad? I didn't answer, because the silence said everything. And they knew it. Later that night, long after the library had closed and we walked across the rain-slick pavement, they flanked me on either side. Talia hooked her arm through mine without asking. Marin slipped her hand into my jacket pocket, fingers brushing mine. It wasn't sexual. Not yet. But it wasn't innocent either. It was tension. It was potential. And beneath all of it, the laughter, the teasing, the shared warmth of bodies under streetlights, there was a truth we all knew but hadn't yet spoken aloud. Something was going to change. Soon. We didn't plan it. That's what I kept telling myself afterward. There wasn't some dramatic moment where one of us crossed a line and everything suddenly shifted. No slammed doors or declarations. It was quieter than that. Slower. Like stepping into water you thought was shallow, only to realize, too late, that it had pulled you under. The library had become our ritual, but that night, we didn't go there. It was raining again, steady, soft, the kind of rain that made everything look slick and secret. Talia had texted me mid-afternoon. Marin wants to study at her place tonight. You should come too. No emoji. No tease. Just an invitation that felt heavier than the words suggested. I almost said no. Not because I didn't want to, but because I did. Too much. and I wasn't sure I was ready to step off the edge I'd been dancing around for weeks. But I went. Her apartment was off campus, small but warm, books stacked along the walls, a kitchen that smelled faintly of cinnamon and clove. String lights flickered along the windows. Talia greeted me barefoot, wearing a loose black t-shirt that barely hit her thighs. Maren was curled up on the couch in leggings and a flannel shirt, a blanket already pulled over her lap. They looked like they belonged there, like I was the outsider walking into something I didn't quite understand. But they welcomed me in. We didn't study much. There were textbooks, sure, and laptops open on the coffee table. But the conversation strayed. Talia pressed a mug of tea into my hands, her fingers brushing mine just a moment too long. Maren shifted on the couch to make room for me between them, and when I sat, the blanket spilled over all three of us. I felt the heat of them immediately, thighs pressing against mine, shoulders brushing, the occasional flick of fingers across my knee when Talia laughed too hard. The tension was there, not new, but no longer hiding. So, Talia said after a while, tossing a highlighter into the air and catching it. You ever have a threesome before? Maren sighed. Really? What? It's a fair question. I choked slightly on my tea. No, I said after a beat, my voice dry. Can't say I have. Talia grinned. Would you? I looked between them. Maren's expression was unreadable, but her eyes stayed on me. Watching. Measuring. I don't think it's something you plan like a grocery list, I said. Fair. Talia said, leaning back into the couch cushions. Her shirt shifted slightly, revealing a sliver of bare hip. She didn't move to cover it. Maren's voice was softer. So what do you feel then? What do you mean? I mean when you're with us. Like this. She didn't blink. She asked it plainly, without pretense. I sat there for a moment, letting the question breathe. I feel like I'm allowed to exist again, I said quietly. Talia's grin faded, replaced with something gentler. I didn't know how empty I was until I started talking to you too, I added. And now it's like the silence doesn't hurt as much. They didn't respond right away. Instead, Talia leaned her head on my shoulder, and Maren reached down, under the blanket, and laced her fingers with mine. We stayed like that for a long time. Eventually, Talia shifted, slowly, lazily, until she was facing me, one leg tucked under her, the other pressed against mine. You know we're not just here to distract you from her, right? She said softly. I met her gaze. I know. Good, she whispered. And then, without warning, she leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't hard or fast. It wasn't desperate. It was slow. Her lips were warm, soft. Her hand rose to cup my jaw, her thumb brushing my cheekbone. The taste of tea and something sweet lingered on her tongue. And when she finally pulled back, I didn't even get a moment to breathe before Maren leaned in and kissed me too. Hers was different, cooler, focused, a hand settling on my chest, not possessive, grounding. Like she needed me to know she was here too, and this wasn't some game. When she pulled away, she looked at Talia, and something passed between them, a flicker, a silent agreement. Talia smiled first, and then, just like that, we were touching. Hands, thighs, lips, fingers and hair. One of them behind me, the other in front. The room blurred. My pulse spiked. Everything was heat and breath and the overwhelming awareness that this was real. This was happening. It wasn't sex. Not yet. But it was something intimate. Something that made my nerves feel electric and my thoughts fall silent for the first time in months. Talia straddled my lap at one point, her mouth at my ear, whispering things that made my chest tighten. Maren sat beside us, her hand pressed to my thigh, calm and steady, her gaze never breaking. They weren't trying to replace her. They weren't using me. They were inviting me into something I didn't understand yet, something bigger than desire. It was connection. It was being wanted. And I let go. When things finally slowed, we lay tangled on the couch, breathing, laughing, a little. No one said much. There was no need. Talia was on one side of me, head on my chest, fingers idly tracing circles over my ribs. Maren was curled at my other side, blanket draped over her shoulders, one hand still clasped in mine. And for the first time since Elena, I didn't feel like I was bleeding under the surface. I just felt full. Later, as I walked back to my dorm under the weight of the night, my skin still humming from their touch, I passed the cafe. I didn't flinch this time. I didn't see her face behind the glass. I didn't hear her laugh in the background. For the first time, she wasn't everywhere. Because someone else, two someones, had started to fill the empty spaces. By Monday, the whispers had started. Not loud, not direct, just quiet enough to travel farther than you'd expect, like perfume left lingering after someone walks by. A glance that lingered too long. A smile passed between two people as I walked into a lecture hall. A conversation that stopped just a beat too quickly when I entered the dining area. It didn't take a genius to know what they were talking about. 3 people, 2 girls, 1 guy, seen together a little too often, a little too late at night. Once might have been coincidence. Twice, curiosity. But we weren't being subtle anymore. Not really. We still studied together. Still claimed our usual spot in the library. Still passed notebooks back and forth like we were just friends prepping for midterms. But underneath it all, the stolen glances, the brushed fingers, the shared smirks, the truth was obvious. Something had changed between us, and the campus noticed. The first time it became real was in the student center. I'd stopped in after class, just killing time, when I saw Elena. She was across the room, laughing with a few of her friends. The guy from the cafe wasn't with her, at least not today. She looked good, effortless. Her hair curled just right, the kind of makeup that looked invisible until you realized how intentional it was. She caught sight of me and did a double take. I braced myself for a look of smugness, or dismissal, maybe even guilt. But what I got was worse. Curiosity, and something that might have been jealousy. Because a second later, Talia and Marin walked in. They spotted me instantly, like always, and walked straight over. Talia was carrying a smoothie she barely drank. Marin had headphones draped around her neck, one thumb still tucked into the front of my hoodie, like she owned the space between us. Neither girl hesitated. Talia slid into the seat beside me, draped her legs across my lap, and stole one of my fries. Marin stood behind my chair, leaned down, and whispered something in my ear that made my mouth twitch. Elena saw all of it. I didn't need to look directly at her. I felt the heat of her attention, the crackle of surprise in the air around her table. And when I finally did glance up, she wasn't smiling anymore. Good. It wasn't about revenge. Not really. But that didn't mean it didn't feel good. For so long, I'd been the one dragging his heart around in the dirt, the broken guy everyone pitied, the ghost in the hoodie who barely spoke. I didn't know her explanations. I didn't know anyone anything. Still, it surprised me how fast the gossip spread. By Tuesday, Jake, my roommate, looked up from his laptop and asked, "So, are you, actually hooking up with both of them?" I paused mid-sip of coffee. "What?" He raised an eyebrow. "Come on, man. Don't play dumb. Talia and Marin. Everyone's talking. Everyone needs a hobby," I muttered. Jake grinned. "I'm not judging. I mean, damn. That's impressive." "It's not like that. Could have fooled me. Talia practically sat on your lap yesterday in the quad." "She was cold." He laughed. "Yeah, sure." I didn't bother explaining. Not because I didn't want to clear it up, but because the truth was, I didn't know what it was anymore. We weren't just hooking up. We weren't just friends. It wasn't casual, not really, but it wasn't defined either. We were still figuring it out, still moving inside this messy, strange space that felt more like ours with every passing day. But the campus didn't see that nuance. They saw the story they wanted to see. Rumors flared like dry tinder. She's just using him to get back at her ex. He's just playing them both. I heard they all sleep in the same bed. I bet he cheated on Elena first. Funny how no one cared when I was falling apart. But now that I had something, even something complicated, everyone had something to say. Talia thought it was hilarious. "I kind of love it," she said one night, spinning lazily in a desk chair at Marin's apartment. "Let them talk. Let them fantasize." Marin was less amused. "They don't know us." "Exactly. Which means they can't touch what they don't understand." I sat between them on the couch, legs stretched out, hands resting on my knees. "You okay with all this?" Marin asked, turning toward me. "With what?" "Being talked about, watched, speculated on." I thought about it. About how much I'd hated being invisible. How much I'd hated being seen only as Elena's ex. How this, whatever this was, had given me something new to be. "I think," I said slowly, "I'd rather be whispered about than pitted." They both smiled at that. Still, not everything was so easy. One afternoon, in the cafeteria, I passed Elena again. This time, she didn't look away. She approached me near the vending machines, arms crossed, jaw tight. "Really?" she said, voice low. I blinked. Excuse me. Talia and Marin? Both of them. I stayed silent. You don't think this is pathetic? Pathetic. I echoed. It's desperate, Liam. You can't just throw yourself at the first girls who pay attention and think it means something. I stared at her, the anger bubbling up slow and steady. You kissed someone else while we were still together, I said. In public. In broad daylight. Her mouth opened, but I didn't let her speak. You smiled after, Elena. You didn't even flinch. She looked down. That's not. And now you're mad I'm moving on? She flushed, but recovered quickly. You don't even know what you're doing. You think this thing with them is real? I know it's more real than whatever we had at the end. That shut her up. She turned on her heel and walked away, and for the first time since the breakup, I didn't feel pain watching her go. I felt peace. Back on campus, the whispers continued. Some people were curious, some judgmental, a few even bold enough to ask questions, mostly guys with dumb grins and girls who looked at me like I was some kind of experiment. But in the library, it was quiet. Safe. Ours. Marin still touched my hand under the table when I was stressed. Talia still leaned against my side like I was her favorite pillow. We kissed, sometimes both at once, sometimes one at a time. We tangled fingers under textbooks, scribbled notes on each other's margins, shared silence that didn't feel empty anymore. And when we walked out together, people looked. Let them. For the first time, I wasn't living in the wreckage of someone else's choices. I was making my own. It happened on a Thursday, mid-afternoon, the kind of day when the air smelled like cut grass and cold coffee, and the quad was alive with half laughter and the rustling of backpacks being shuffled between classes. I was walking out of my psychology lecture, half distracted by a message from Talia, something ridiculous about stealing my hoodie again, when I heard her voice. Liam. I stopped. The voice was sharp, measured, controlled. It was Elena. She stood just off the path, arms crossed over her chest, framed by the red bricks of the humanities building. Her hair was pulled back in a high ponytail. No smile, no blush, just eyes fixed on me like I owed her something. I didn't move. Can we talk? She asked. The phrasing was polite, but her tone wasn't. I hesitated, then gave a small nod and followed her a few steps off the path, just far enough to be out of earshot. Students walked past us in every direction. The world didn't stop for our history, but in my chest, something slowed. She didn't waste time. What the hell are you doing? She asked, arms still crossed, voice barely above a whisper, but burning with restrained heat. What do you mean? I mean with them. Talia and Marin. You think this is healthy? I stared at her for a second, caught off guard by the sheer hypocrisy. You cheated on me, I said flatly. In public, while I was getting us coffee. She blinked, but recovered quickly. That's not what this is about, isn't it? This isn't about me and what happened, she snapped. This is about you. About the fact that you're spiraling. I almost laughed. You think I'm spiraling? You don't think this whole thing is a little reckless? I exhaled, forcing calm. What exactly is bothering you, Elena? That I didn't fall apart like you thought I would? That someone else wants me? She flinched, barely. It's not real, Liam. They don't care about you. They're what? I stepped forward. Comfort? A distraction? What you were doing when you kissed him? Her lips parted, but no words came. You smiled, I said, voice quieter now. You smiled after you kissed him. That's the part one can't forget. That wasn't real. I cut in, because it sure felt real when I was standing there, watching the person I loved kiss someone else and smile like I didn't exist. Her mouth snapped shut. We stood there in silence, just long enough for the wind to pick up and scatter a few loose leaves between our feet. She swallowed. I made a mistake. I raised an eyebrow. Now you say that. I thought we were fading. I thought you didn't care anymore. You never said that. I didn't know how to, she said, the words rushing now nervous. You started getting quiet. You were always distracted. I thought I was losing you, so you kissed someone else? My voice was sharper now. That's how you fix things. Her expression hardened. You don't get to be self-righteous, Liam. You moved on fast. Like, suspiciously fast. That's rich coming from you. You're with two girls, she hissed. What does that even mean? It means they're there for me, I said, simply. It means they saw something broken and didn't look away. She rolled her eyes. So now you're in love with both of them? I didn't say that. But you are, aren't you? She snapped, jealousy bleeding into every syllable. You're sleeping with them. letting them drag you around like some accessory. Do they even know what they're doing to you? I stared at her for a long second. They're not dragging me anywhere. I'm choosing this. Every day? She scoffed. You sound insane. No, I said, stepping back. I sound free. That shut her up. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes flicked over me like she was trying to find some remnant of the boy she used to control. The one who would have apologized for her mistake. The one who would have begged for another chance. But he was gone, and I think she knew it. She looked down, then back up. Softer now. I just didn't expect this from you. I nodded. That makes two of us. I turned to leave, but she called after me. You really think this thing with them is going to last? I paused. No idea, I said over my shoulder. But it's real, and that's more than I ever felt at the end with you. I didn't wait for a reply. That night, I told them. Everything. I sat between them on Marin's bed, my hoodie still damp from the rain, and I told them about Elena. About the confrontation. About the things she said, and the things I didn't. Talia listened in silence, legs pulled up to her chest, eyes dark with emotion. Marin sat cross-legged beside me, her hand resting over mine. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then Marin said, She doesn't get to have opinions anymore. She doesn't get to touch you anymore, Talia added. Not with her words. Not with her eyes. Not at all. They didn't say they were proud of me. They didn't need to. They just leaned in, pressing their bodies against mine, one on each side. Heat. Safety. Presence. Talia kissed my jaw. Marin kissed my hand. And for the first time since the cafe, I felt untethered from her, from Elena. Not angry. Not resentful. Just done. Campus kept talking. Let them. Because after that confrontation, I stopped hearing the whispers. I wasn't listening for them anymore. I had other voices in my head now. Ones that laughed with me, challenged me, saw through me. Ones that kissed me in the quiet and held me in the dark. It wasn't about sex anymore. Not really. That surprised me. Because at first, if I'm being honest, that was the easiest part to lean into. The physical pull. The nights where touches blurred. Lips found their way across collarbones and stomachs. Fingers threaded through hair and into places still raw with heartbreak. There was comfort in it. Escape. Heat without consequence. But now things had shifted. What surprised me wasn't how close we were in bed. It was how close we were everywhere else. We still tangled together under blankets, yes. But more often, we talked. Laid out on Marin's floor, backs pressed to the carpet, her speaker playing lo-fi beats while Talia twirled an old pencil between her fingers and told me about her childhood in California. How her parents split when she was 9. How she used to eavesdrop on their fights through the vents and pretend it was a TV show just to make it less real. Marin added her own stories and pieces, quieter ones. She talked about her first panic attack at 13. About the way her mom used to punish her for being too sensitive, as if her emotions were a disease to cure. She once said, I didn't cry for 3 years. I thought that was strength. I told them about the year I spent in therapy after my dad left. About how I still hesitate before knocking on my mom's door, even now, as if he might be behind it one day. None of it was rehearsed. None of it was performative. Just honesty, threaded between us like silk. And in that honesty, something tender grew. One night, after a study session turned late-night floor nap, I woke up tangled between the two of them. Talia was on my chest, breathing slow and even, her legs slung over mine, hair wild across my shirt. Marin was curled against my side, hand resting gently on my ribs, her breath warm against my neck. I didn't move, not because I couldn't, but because I didn't want to. The quiet felt sacred, like a secret only we were allowed to keep. I stared at the ceiling, the soft glow of streetlights leaking through the blinds, and realized I didn't feel hollow anymore. I felt held, not just physically. They weren't crutches. They weren't band-aids over Elena's betrayal. They were becoming something else entirely. A choice, a connection, a kind of intimacy I didn't know I needed. The next morning, Marin made us all breakfast, eggs and toast, and black coffee that tasted like firewood. Talia danced around the kitchen in socks, humming to a song only she could hear, occasionally stealing food off my plate when she thought I wasn't looking. Marin didn't say much, but when I caught her watching us, me and Talia, her eyes weren't jealous. They were soft. Later, as we cleaned up, I asked her quietly, "Are you okay with all this?" She paused, towel in hand, then nodded. "Are you?" "I think I am." Then I'm good. She reached for my hand, pulled it to her lips, and kissed the back of it. A simple gesture, but one that hit deeper than anything that came before. That same week, I caught the flu. It hit me hard. One of those knock-you-flat kinds that turn your entire world into a blur of tissues, sweat, and misery. I didn't even ask. Talia showed up first. She let herself in using the spare key I forgot I gave her and brought 2 bags of groceries, a gallon of orange juice, and 3 kinds of medicine I didn't even know I needed. Marin followed later, armed with 2 books, a heating pad, and the softest hoodie I've ever worn in my life. They didn't take turns. They didn't trade shifts like nurses. They stayed. Both of them. Talia rubbed my back while I coughed. Marin held cold cloths to my forehead. I was sweaty, gross, barely coherent, and they still looked at me like I mattered. When I finally stopped shivering, I whispered, "You guys don't have to do this." Talia frowned. "Don't be stupid." Marin kissed my temple. "We're not leaving." And they didn't. Something about being taken care of, truly taken care of, cracked something open inside me. It made everything before them feel so performative in comparison. With Elena, I always felt like I had to earn attention, prove myself, show that I was worth keeping. But with Talia and Marin, I didn't have to be anything. I just had to be. That kind of acceptance changes you. It softens your defenses. It forces you to stop pretending. A few days later, fully recovered, I sat across from both of them in our now familiar library nook. Talia had her legs kicked up on my lap, eyes closed, headphones in. Marin was reading, one hand resting lightly over mine. I stared at the 2 of them for a long moment. And then I said it. "I think I'm falling for you." I didn't look at either of them as I said it. I just let it sit there. The weight of it. The truth of it. Talia cracked one eye open. "You think?" I smiled. "I know." Marin looked up. No surprise in her eyes, just quiet recognition. Talia sat up, pulled her headphones off, and studied me for a moment. "Both of us." "Yeah." She leaned in, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "Took you long enough." Marin squeezed my hand. And I knew, they already knew. They had known for a while. They'd just been waiting for me to catch up. Love wasn't something I thought I'd find in the wreckage of betrayal. But that's exactly where it grew. Not in the heat of revenge. Not in the noise of gossip. Not in the rebound. It bloomed in shared silences. In books passed back and forth. In sick days and slow mornings and library corners that felt more like home than my own bed. It grew in the cracks Elena left behind, watered not by desire alone, but by care, presence, patience. And now? Now it was something I wanted to protect. Not because I was afraid of losing it, but because I finally believed I was worthy of keeping it. I didn't expect the letter. It showed up one morning, tucked neatly under my dorm room door, folded twice and sealed with a sticker from the campus bookstore. A pressed daisy, ironic in its sweetness. I recognized the handwriting before I even opened it. Elena. I stood there for a moment, still in my boxers, bedhead wild, coffee untouched on the desk beside me. My first instinct was to toss it in the trash. My second was to read it, not because I cared what she had to say, but because part of me needed to know what this last act would be. Inside, the letter was simple. 1 page. No grand confessions. Just clean, deliberate lines. "Liam, I don't expect you to respond. I just need to say this. I miss you. And not because you're with someone else, or to someone else's, but because you were my home for so long, and I'm only now realizing how much I took that for granted. I don't blame you for hating me. I hated myself for a while too. But watching you lately, it's different. You're different. You're okay without me. And that hurts. But it's also beautiful. Still, if there's any part of you that still wants to talk, even just once, I'll be at the cafe. Friday. The usual table. Noon. No pressure. Just presence. E. I read it twice. Then a third time. And something inside me coiled. Not because I wanted her back. I didn't. But because this was the test I hadn't realized I was waiting for. All week, I wrestled with it. I didn't tell Marin and Talia at first. Not because I was hiding something, but because I didn't know how to bring it up without making it seem bigger than it was. I didn't want to make it big, but it was big. In my chest. In my head. A weight pressing against the ribs that had only recently stopped aching. I told myself I wouldn't go. That it was pointless. That closure was a myth we made up to justify dragging out pain. But Friday came. And at 11:50 a.m., I found myself walking toward the cafe. She was there already. Same seat. Same drink. almond milk latte, cinnamon on top. Her hair was loose this time, her nails freshly painted. She looked like a version of herself I remembered, and also someone I didn't recognize at all. When she saw me, her face lit up, not with triumph, not with smugness, with hope. That's what caught me off guard. "Hey," she said, standing. "Hey." I sat down. My heart thudded, not from nerves, but from how not nervous I was. There was a time I would have given anything for her attention, her approval. But now, sitting across from her, I felt oddly calm. She studied me for a second. "You cut your hair." "Yeah. Looks good. Thanks." There was a pause. The hum of the espresso machine filled the space between us. Then she said, "I'm glad you came. I wasn't sure I would." She nodded. "I wasn't sure you should." I raised an eyebrow. She exhaled. "I didn't call you here to win you back, Liam." No, she said firmly. "I wanted to. For a long time. But after seeing you the past few weeks, I think I'd just be dragging you backwards." I didn't say anything. She stirred her drink. "I kept trying to tell myself you were just rebounding, that you'd burn out. But that's not what's happening, is it?" "No," I said simply. Her shoulders dropped. "And it's not just sex," she added, more to herself. "No, it's not." She looked up at me again, and this time her eyes were wet, not crying, not begging, just human. "I ruined something good," she whispered. "You did. I was scared. You were starting to feel distant, like I wasn't enough. You never asked." "I know." Another beat of silence. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small photograph. A Polaroid. Us, from sophomore year. Sitting on the campus lawn, tangled in a blanket, my hand on her knee, her nose crinkled mid-laugh. "I kept it," she said. I took it, looked at it, then slid it gently back toward her. "You should keep it." She nodded slowly. "You're not a villain, Elena," I said, surprising myself with the softness of it. "But you were selfish. And you hurt me." "I know. But I'm done carrying that weight." Her eyes met mine. "And what about them? Talia and Marin? They make me feel more seen than I ever did with you." She closed her eyes briefly, inhaled. "Then don't lose them." "I don't plan to." We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just sat there for a few more minutes, two people who had loved once, learning to let go. And then I left. That evening, I told Marin first. We were at her place, sitting at the edge of her bed, her socks mismatched, hair damp from a shower. "I met with Elena today." Her expression didn't change. Just a small nod. "Yeah." She wrote me a letter. Asked to talk. "And you went." "I did." She waited. No accusation in her eyes. No panic. She wanted closure. So did I guess. "And did you get it?" I exhaled. "Yeah." She leaned into me, head on my shoulder. "Good." Later that night, I told Talia. We were lying in her bed this time, bodies curved together under her worn-out comforter. She traced lazy shapes on my chest with her finger as I explained. "I'm not mad," she said when I finished. "I get it." "You do?" She nodded. "Sometimes the only way to let go is to look the past in the face and realize it doesn't own you anymore. You're okay?" She looked up at me. "I'm not afraid of ghosts," she said. "Especially not ones you've already buried." That night, lying between them again, one tucked under each arm, their breaths syncing with mine, I realized something. Closure isn't a door that slams shut. It's the decision to stop knocking on it. I didn't need to prove anything to Elena. Not anymore. What I had now wasn't a rebound. It wasn't revenge. It was real, and I was ready to fight for it. It didn't end with fireworks. There was no sudden epiphany, no grand speech on a campus balcony under the stars. Life, as it turns out, doesn't wrap things up with a bow. It just keeps going. But that's what made the choice matter more. Because it wasn't made in a moment of passion or pain. It wasn't driven by anger or lust, or the need to prove something to someone who walked away. It was quiet. Steady. Mine. The week after meeting with Elena, I felt lighter. Not euphoric. Not invincible. But clear. I no longer woke up with that clench in my chest. The one that used to tighten every time my phone buzzed or I passed the cafe where it all fell apart. I didn't flinch when I saw people whisper. I didn't feel the need to explain myself anymore. Because I had stopped looking backward. And I had started, finally, to live. Talia and Marin noticed. They didn't say it out loud, but I saw it in the way they looked at me. In how their hands lingered longer when they touched me. How their laughter seemed less like a performance and more like breathing. We didn't talk about love every day, We didn't define what we were with a label, but there was something between us that didn't need a name to be real. One night, the three of us were lying in Talia's room, limbs tangled together on her too small mattress. The overhead light was off, the room lit only by a string of fairy lights and the blue glow of Marin's phone screen. You ever think about how weird this is? Talia asked suddenly. I turned toward her. What part? All of it. Us. This. She gestured vaguely at the three of us. Marin didn't look up. Define weird. Talia grinned. Like, statistically, how many people end up in something like this? One guy? Two girls. None of us jealous. Nobody fighting for dominance. It shouldn't work. But it does, I said. Marin finally looked over, her mouth curving into a soft smile. That's what makes it beautiful. Talia rolled her eyes playfully, but didn't argue. We fell asleep like that, tangled in each other, cocooned in warmth and familiarity. And sometime between midnight and morning, I realized that what we had wasn't just a chapter in my healing. It was the story I wanted to keep writing. The real turning point came a few days later. We were walking back from a night class, all three of us, when we passed a group of students outside the dining hall. I saw the way they looked at us, heard the whispers. One of them even said something under his breath. Three-way freak show. Talia stiffened beside me. Marin's grip on my arm tightened. And in that moment, I had a choice. I could laugh it off, pretend I didn't care, or I could finally stop hiding. I turned around, calmly, and walked up to the guy who said it. He looked up, smirking, until he saw my expression. I don't know what kind of life you live, I said, voice even. But if you ever find two people who make you feel half as whole as these two make me feel every single day, I hope you have the decency to shut the fuck up and protect it. He blinked, said nothing. I turned back around, rejoined Marin and Talia, and we kept walking. None of us said anything for a moment. Then Talia whispered, "You're so hot when you do that." And Marin laughed. A real, loud, belly laugh. The kind that felt like sunlight. The rest of the semester blurred. We studied, we kissed, we slept. We fought sometimes, over small things, like who used the last of the oat milk or whether Talia's music taste was objectively terrible. But we always found our way back. One night, finals approaching, I found a note in my dorm. No envelope, just folded paper. Inside, in two different handwritings, were the words, "Choose us, not because you're afraid of being alone, but because you're not anymore." It wasn't a demand. It wasn't a plea. It was an invitation. And I accepted it. I didn't go home that summer. Instead, I found an off-campus apartment. Small, barely enough room for one, let alone three. But we made it work. Talia brought art supplies and painted the walls with sprawling vines and galaxies. Marin brought her record player and crates of vinyl, spinning old soul tracks and ambient sounds while we cooked together barefoot in the kitchen. And me? I brought the past, but I didn't let it stay. I burned the photo Elena gave me, not out of hatred, but because I didn't need it anymore. I didn't need reminders of what broke me. I had what rebuilt me. One night, late in July, I was standing on the tiny balcony of our apartment. The city buzzed below. Warm air. Soft music behind me. Talia stepped out, barefoot, tank top and boxers, hair a mess. She leaned against the railing. "You look like you're thinking something important." "I am." "Oh yeah." I turned to her. "I used to think getting cheated on would be the worst thing that ever happened to me." She raised a brow. "And now I think it was just the push I needed to stop pretending I was okay with being half-loved." She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Marin joined us a moment later, slipping between us, resting her head on my shoulder. We stood there in silence, the three of us, watching the city breathe. And I knew, in that moment, that I had made my decision. Not to be in a throuple, not to get over my ex, but to live, to love, to stop letting betrayal write my story and start writing it myself. People still talked. They always would. But I stopped listening. Because what I had wasn't for them. It was for us. For the late nights, the whispered truths, the shared beds and burned breakfasts. For the healing. For the love, messy, unorthodox, and real. Elena taught me what pain felt like. But Talia and Marin? They taught me what wholeness was.